That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Pet Sematary Bloodlines, the directorial debut of Lindsey Anderson Beer, which is premiering on Paramount Plus October 6th, 2023.
Directorial debut?
Yep, and it is, of course, the prequel to Stephen King's Pet Sematary. It's based on a conversation that the lead character has in Stephen King's book, apparently, which I haven't read in years. Fittingly, this is directed by a woman because Mary Lambert, one of the few women directing horror at the time, did the original Pet Sematary.
Oh. Well, sorry, girl, I didn't like this movie. The premise: in 1969, a young Jud Crandall dreams of escaping his hometown until he discovers the malevolent secrets of what is buried in a cemetery. He confronts a haunting family legacy that forever connects him to the place and unites with his childhood friends as they face an ancient evil that has plagued Ludlow from its inception.
Ludlow.
That's the full movie.
Robert Ludlow. Yeah, you know, I always think of that line in Interview with the Vampire, the Neil Jordan one, about they can't drink dead blood.
Oh.
Because it'll kill them. That's what this kind of storytelling feels like. This is dead blood.
Damn.
Let us please do some original story. Even if you're paying homage or borrowing, cobbling together things, like, there's just absolutely no suspense to something like this.
What's your pull quote?
A bland cash grab, which plays exactly like the footnote it's based on from King's novel. Beer's debut goes through the motions until the bitter end, squandering her wonderful vintage cast.
My pull quote: this lifeless prequel should have been buried in the Pet Sematary. The story.
Ouch.
I mean, it is the IMDb premise. Like, so Jud Crandall, who we know in the '80s movie, is played by
The great Fred Gwynne. Mm-hmm.
So in this movie, he's played by
a young thing named Jackson White,
a very handsome man. I can't take that away from him. But his character, he is planning on leaving Ludlow with his girlfriend Norma.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to talk about Norma's hair in a minute. But they're meant to leave Ludlow to go join the Peace Corps.
In Michigan.
But their plan gets foiled because there's this other kid in town, young man named Timmy,
mm-hmm.
who just came back from the war. And he was injured, we're told. But we find out that he was not injured. He was killed. And when they brought his body back, his dad, played by David Duchovny, buried his ass in the Pet Sematary.
And apparently his dog, too.
And the dog.
Although we don't see that happen. But
So, of course, Timmy and the dog are acting crazy. And the dad, David Duchovny, knows why. And we have some OGs in the film, specifically Pam Grier.
Marjorie, the mail lady. Uh-huh.
Who it was the way she was styled was so confusing, because I kept thinking, is she a mail carrier or is that just her style? And then, but she's both. Like, she dresses like a mail carrier. But of course, they all know what's going on at the Pet Sematary because they understand the history of that land.
This is not an origin of the Pet Sematary.
No, and that's what I thought this would be. Like, why we do learn in one scene that flashes back 300 years.
Yep, to 1674.
1674, we get one scene where we see, like, the people who settled Ludlow, the man named Ludlow. That was land, like, that was an indigenous burial site.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is happening. So, like, so simple. And,
yep.
and they give it, like, 3 minutes. And it looks kind of cheap when they try to go back and like the costuming, but it plays out just like you would expect. Like, Timmy is infected, then
Timmy kills Donna, one of the two indigenous characters, and buries her, and then she comes back and kidnaps Norma.
And Donna has a brother,
Manny, played by Forrest Goodluck of The Revenant.
And Manny is very good friends with Jud.
Uh-huh.
So then the end of the final act is Jud and Manny trying to figure out what's going on. So they end up having to kill the people who have come back to life. They do. The end.
Yep, basically. that is about
because
it.
we know that the 80s movie is, many years later. So it's like we know Jud makes it, obviously. So there was no tension. Like, the mood is it just feels like, well, then who did Firestarter is the Exorcist writer.
Scott Teems wrote that, yeah.
Because I thought this movie kind of felt like that Zac Efron Firestarter. Like, no life. I mean, the original Firestarter is not great either.
True, yeah.
But, no life, no mood.
Yes.
A handsome man running around in a tank top, like, okay.
All the same Stephen King tropes. In fact, how they utilize the OGs in this feels very much like the adult version of the characters in It. that know about this evil that they have to regularly come back and combat.
Yeah. The subplot, or, for... I don't even have really any notes. I'm just trying to find something to say. Jud's character, he's kind of uncomfortable in Ludlow because everyone thinks that he didn't get drafted to the war because his dad paid off the examining doctor. So that's kind of a thing. But the only person who brings that up is Timmy the zombie.
Yep, man.
So who cares?
Well,
Who cares what the and the crazy ass daddy? Like, who cares what they have to say?
Your daddy bought that piece for you. Why don't you go enjoy it? And then we learn in that 1674 sequence that one of the founding fathers was a Pastor Crandall. So the
bloodline.
Jud confronts his parents, played by Henry Thomas from the little boy from E.T., and Samantha Mathis, who I haven't seen in forever. She was kind of a 90s it girl in the Bogdanovich film, The Thing Called Love, who keep trying to push their son out of Ludlow. And he's like, well, you know why? Because of this secret.
And then isn't it a priest who tells him about?
They go... And
the priest is drunk as hell. That was a funny moment. Because the priest, because when they walk into the church, the priest gets startled and drops a bottle of wine.
He's laying down in the pew.
Drunk as hell.
He's like, hey, look, I have all these papers that I found when I came to take this post.
So stupid. And then while he's talking to them, he's holding another bottle of alcohol.
I mean, I guess it's a small town. Donna, played by Isabella LeBlanc, has a ridiculous line where she goes, those dreams I've been having all week, they turn to nightmares.
Yeah, that was
like,
dumb.
Okay.
And then when she turns into a zombie, she goes to see Norma in the hospital because Norma got bit by a dog, Timmy's dog. And Norma's trying to clean Donna's foot. And as she wipes it very gently, like all the skin peels off.
She hasn't been dead that long.
Well, I thought that was like the only moment that kind of felt... I mean, when the dog bit Norma, but it was very predictable that the dog was going to bite her. But yeah, there's nothing to this movie.
It really does not feel like 1969. Even the vintage soundtrack moments. I mean, as soon as CCR's Bad Moon Rising comes on, I'm like, this is used very memorably in American Werewolf in London. Why this song? I don't know.
Speaking of... it not feeling like the 60s, Norma does not look like she's in the 60s, and Norma has a full head of foiled highlights. And I was trying to research when that became popular, like the 80s.
Yeah.
So she's either a trendsetter or someone just didn't think to make sure her hair looked period appropriate.
I don't think anything feels really period. I don't think Henry Thomas, while he looks like he could be Jackson White's kin, I don't know that he was really fitting for that role.
I'm going to use my one F word for the ending, which I thought was the only part that seemed kind of fitting, is that we hear, who says it? Sometimes dead is better. Stay the fuck out of Ludlow. And then we see a truck drive by, like in the 80s version when that truck kills the kid.
Yeah.
That was the only part of this movie that took me to the original.
That line is repeated throughout. That's what Henry Thomas says also when Donna kills him by impaling him. And death is a gate. If you think back to Mary Lambert's first adaptation of this Stephen King novel, like, you remember a lot of things, or at least I did, like Zelda, the Dale Midkiff's sister with scoliosis, and Stephen King, while I'm very highly critical of some of his writing, some of his stuff really does a good job of developing characterization and creating a tone or a mood, and this isn't.
I think based on what they had to work with, the better approach would have been to focus on the OGs and maybe them trying to hide this secret. And then if you want to tie it to the original, maybe at the end of the story, we see that the Jud character learns about the Pet Sematary. But to have, I mean, I don't know, his characters, for him to like carry this movie, and like it just felt so like there's nothing to him.
Well, it's like why are we not kind of also delving into the subtext that seem to be in play, such as who was drafted and who was not in this town, who was privileged, how that relates to maybe the indigenous population that's still there, because the three of those boys were supposedly thick as thieves, because there's this old picture that we keep seeing. And I don't know why we just...
Oh, Manny, Timmy, and Jud, yeah.
Yeah, why are we playing around with that in some way that seems to make it more than what it is, which is just a ripoff of another film?
What would you give this movie?
1.5. And I love Pam Grier, and I'm glad that she got a nice little paycheck, hopefully. But
I would give this film 1.5 out of 5 as well. Hit the thanks button, listen to our podcast. Bye.